everybody, welcome back to another Blind Tuesdays. Hope you guys been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. So excuse me if I sound a little congested. Just if this video might be a tad bit brief, just because I'm gonna be heading out pretty soon here. Make no promises though, just because, it's always just how I roll. I always say it's gonna be short, but I end up talking a little bit longer. But we're back for another Blind Tuesdays, and for this week, we spun the wheel and landed on the 80s. And the 80s, of course, being a lot of different types of films, a lot of notable pieces. I would say the 70s is a better decade overall compared to the 80s, but the 80s still has many great films and many classics, many notable pictures. And I was initially going to do Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, to be specific. I adore Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's one of my favorite films of all time. But in the same breath of talking about one of my favorite films of all time, I figured it's to address a film that I don't believe I've ever addressed before on the channel, or at least have talked about maybe here and there, but not and dedicated to a full video. So I decided to do away with Raiders of the Lost Ark, even though it's one of my favorite films of all time, and trade it in for another of one of my favorite films of all time. That film being The Shining, which was directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring notably so Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance and the Torrance family, as it were. One of them, one of the kids, Danny, played by, I believe, Danny Lloyd, I believe. And forgive me, but I forget the actress's name, but plays the mother as well. Family of three, father, mother, and a son. The father has taken up to running a hotel up in like a mountain area, and he is taking up on taking care of the place and trying to provide for his family in a much more substantial way. And while working there, there's a sinister nature that is developing within Jack Torrance and alluding to perhaps paranormal activity being taking shape, or perhaps being more uh, knowing of as time goes on. So it's a descent into madness. It is the uh, it is a kind of a vague, haunted house scenario, because one of the things that's very notable about Kubrick's The Shining, which I think a lot of people know about, is that Stephen King, who wrote the book, um, did not love The Shining because of how much it strays away from the actual source material. And I have not read the book, so I don't know what the key differences are, but apparently they are very different in terms of just um, comparisons, and compared to the book, their similarities are very, very vague. So sorry, I just got ahead of myself. Um, but um, but yeah, as I said up front, this is one of my favorite films of all time, and there are many points to bring up about the film. I mean, because I could talk about the film on end, because um, it is just so well constructed. And for one thing, which I think is the highlight of the film, is that aesthetically speaking, it is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the framing, the designs, the the production itself, by just um the the layouts with with just the clothing of the frame, and we must say, like, just how uh all the items in like each rooms or in each like locations, it all is just very formal and yet very like distinct and characteristic. There's something, like, just daunting, older, and um and yet colorful. It's, when you think of that choice of words, just like haunting and older, you would think of something aesthetically much more different, something that might present colors of like darker tints, like of blacks, whites, or grays. And the film is the polar opposite of that when it comes to color. It is very colorful, especially when we go through the hallways and you see like the rug and the textures on that. It's very, very colorful and very expressive in that as well. Um, and same to do with the narrative. I mean, the narrative itself is engrossing, and Kubrick's sensibilities as a filmmaker is always fascinating. Um, and I think that his just the way that he utilizes shots in this, I think, are very fascinating because he's more fascinated with the close up, I think, than anything, when it comes to The Shining. And it works to the film's benefit because it's purely about psychology and about a descent and about building of resentment and a a fading of relationships. That's in essence what The Shining is boiling down to. And the ghostly elements that play in the background are things to heighten those or to give more substance to those themes. It's not meant to take away from them, and it absolutely could, and it probably does for some people when watching the film. Because some of the ambiguity that The Shining has does sort of feel diminished once you start to put it together that there is more ghostly attributes at play than more of the psychology that is trying to be represented. And perhaps that is the point of 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 distance between the book is with Kubrick's interest on the psychological elements, whereas Stephen King's maybe is more interested in the ghostly elements. I have no idea. Or maybe it's the other way around. I have no idea. But Kubrick's sensibilities and what he is interested when developing The Shining is all to do with psychology. And the ghostly things are just background material that just are to give more substance to and more weights to those ideas. And to create more persuasion within the descent of Jack Torrance's character. It's not just him individually following, but it's also another influence at the same time. So, there's a great emphasis about toxicities, and it's about the origin points to that, about how we try to improve upon ourselves and perhaps fail to do so, our ambitions, taking the best of us. There's there's interesting ideas at play with The Shining, and a lot of that is illustrated very much so through the performances. I think all the performances here are great, especially the woman in the film. Forgive me, I forgot her name, but she was great in the film, and I mean it's well documented as to what happened on set to get such good performances out of these two, specifically the woman and Jack Nicholson. I mean, I don't agree with how Kubrick handles his productions. I'm not a fan of that. I think it's very cruel and was highly unprofessional to put those people in those situations. I see the results of that at an artistic level, but I just completely detest that sort of mindset and thinking that that is how you should properly, deal with a movie set. No, you should be respectful and not treat people like shit deliberately. So he was intentionally doing that sort of thing where it was favoring Jack Nicholson over the girl and putting the girl down at every turn. Meanwhile, she's stressing out like crazy, like her hair is falling out. Like, I understand in story purposes, I understand the method of what he is trying to get at and what ultimately, on a psychological level, what he is trying to produce in the relationship of these two characters. But that should be translated within the actors, supplying that to the actors. You should not be having to do that yourself, because now you're just being abusive and now you're just being, frankly, an asshole. So, I mean, I love Kubrick as an artist, but questionable motives, to say the least. But I still sit here and say The Shining though, which is fantastic because of what is literally produced. I mean, the performances here are great. I love that stairway scene. Apparently, that stairway scene took like multiple takes, like hundreds of takes to do. It's the one where Jack Nicholson's character is following the wife up the stairs and she's swinging at him with the bat. That scene's really terrific. Of course, the iconic part of the film, the Here's Johnny moment, is also terrific. Um, the twins in the hallway. There's a lot of there's a lot of notable things about The Shining, and not just by word of mouth. I don't think that that is, it's not just nostalgia. It's not just a point of pop culture references. It's it's because those moments also work effectively. When the twins are represented, and then that little flash of them being dead on the floor, it's great because it gives, legitimate paranoia and fear within the viewing of The Shining. And of course, the stairway scene and when he's axing the door down, there is tension there. There is that uneasiness, that uncertainty that is there, mainly due with the performances, and again with what Kubrick is doing in the filmmaking with these attention to close-up shots. I mean, a lot of the film is close-up. A lot of the times it is focusing on the characters' faces and how they are, and what they're. It's all about what they're doing on the inside and less do what they're doing on the outside. Or in a better way to marry the two. It's about what's happening on the inside and how that translates to the outside. You know, that's what the film is concerned with. Like I said, it is a study of psychology and ultimately that of a descent into madness, how one gets to that level, you know. Um, and it's just really, really great. Like I said, the one knock against it is the paranormal that is in the background. I mean, yes, it does give the film some substance, but at the same time, it takes away a little bit of it because of the ambiguity that is represented or that is felt, or what could have been a really solid piece of ambiguity. And there is some there. I mean, the ending itself is rather ambiguous until you put it together yourself. It's not a hard thing to figure out. Um, but there is that ghostly nature embedded throughout the film, and it does maybe take a little from the film because of what it could have been more in terms of the mystery. There could have been a solid chunk of ambiguity if this ghostly element was not there. Because with it being there, it does supply a substance, but at the same time, it makes things um, rather aware, is a little bit more blatant as to the mystery of what's going on. So, um, because I think it would have been so much more fascinating if we had ended the film and your questions are like, well, what caused him to get to that place? What was it? Did it have to do with past events? Did it have to do with his own struggles, trying to maintain a better sense of self? Was it have that maybe there's a ghostly element to it? Maybe the house is haunted. Maybe it's influencing him. Little suggestions here or there would have been nice instead of it having such a hold on you. You feel that ghostly presence, and again, warranted. It helps, but it also takes away at the same time. Um, there's also a few things here and there that I've never really gotten. There's some odd stuff that is left there without much explanation. There's like a whole bear scene. That whole I don't want how do I say it without really I mean, this is not a kids channel, but you guys know what I'm referring to, that scene. I'll put the picture here. Yeah, that scene where it seems like a guy is doing stuff. Um, odd stuff like that just pops up, and I guess you can just chalk it up to it, the haunted house, and all the ghostly elements are now just presenting themselves to you. Because that is also another thing about the film is that it gradually starts to unveil these things to you. So it's not as if the film is leaning on ambiguity. It wishes to have that ambiguity, but it also wishes to also be quite blatant at the same time, and more of the latter is happening rather than the former. So, um, but like I said, it doesn't take away from my experience of watching the film and the aura that Kubrick crafts within The Shining, because that sense of paranoia, that sense of fear, that more importantly, that insanity, that descent is felt purely to do with the performances being put forth by Jack Nicholson, by the girl. The little kid is great too. Um, they all do great work, and it's very, very strong, very engaging in that front. And what Kubrick brings on an aesthetic front, on just style, on filmmaking, it's all very, very fascinating. And what you get in The Shining is something really, really engaging, really investing, a bit blatant, a bit on the nose. Yes, I mean, it is unfortunate what those ghostly elements might do the to the story itself, what it takes away within the story. But, as it stands though, it's still really, really, really engaging. Um, I wouldn't say it's my favorite of Kubrick's films, though. I might, I'm not sure who I'd give that to. Maybe A Clockwork Orange. I'm not entirely sure, but it is very, 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 very good, and I obviously still quite love it. If I say it's one of my favorite films of all time, I acknowledge it is with some fault. I mean, no film is perfect, obviously, but in terms of the films that have really sat with me, the films that have left an impact on me, and just generally speaking, with craftsmanship, with performances, with aesthetics, production design. I mean, just chef's kiss on this. Um, I mean, the whole idea about the maze, like there's things that you can interpret from that about perhaps the whole point of toxicity, about how he is taking priority of that relationship, and these two are trying so hard to get out of that abusive environment, and that's the whole point of the maze, is them trying to run around and find a way out, you know um like like there is stuff there that is left visually ambiguous, but in terms of the narrative front, about just literally what is going on, what's at play, and I think that the film would have benefited more from more of a narrative ambiguity than less so a visual ambiguity. Um, so, um, but it's still really engaging, even with all the knowledge that is there, and it is still really, really captivating. Mainly to do with what Kubrick is doing, what Jack Nicholson is doing, what those aesthetics are doing. It's just really, really good. And of course, it's one of the most well-known horror films of all time, and for good reason. I mean, is it scary? I wouldn't qualify it as so, but it is. It is. Um, it is very. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's something unsettling. There's something uncomfortable, in watching The Shining, and it probably has to do with the subject matter. It probably has to do with the performances, or maybe it's just a blend of all of that stuff. Whatever that is, there is some level of uncertainty when watching The Shining. It's not complete and utter fear like The Exorcist is. I would still say The Exorcist is like my favorite horror film of all time, but there's a lot of strong elements that come with The Shining, and there's also things that take away from The Shining. But the things that take away from The Shining versus the things that benefit The Shining, those elements, the performances, the production, the directing, all that outweighs the issues that I can find the within the just the narrative presentation. So So I love this film. I absolutely love this film. It's been a while since I've seen it. Actually, I should probably revisit it. Um, maybe for Halloween. Maybe for Halloween. Um, but yeah, really, really adore it. I love it. It's not perfect, obviously. Um, and would I go as far as to say it's a masterpiece? I wouldn't say that, but it is a damn good film, and I enjoy the hell out of it. Um, but I do acknowledge that there are flaws. It's kind of in the context of like Blade Runner. It's got its issues, but it still stacks up and it still engages, and it really just it enthralls me. So mainly to do with the craftsmanship. That's the key difference. With Blade Runner, it has to do more with what it's telling me. With The Shining, it has a lot to do with what it's showing me, and um, and what it's showing me with just those performances and all the other stuff going on around it, it's pretty damn good. So, so yeah, so those are my thoughts on The Shining. I absolutely love it. I love it. It's flawed, but it's still a really good piece. Um, so that's the way I'll put it. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on The Shining, and of course, this being Blind Tuesdays, of course, I've had dedicated 20 minutes to this. I told you I was going to talk on in. Um, but yeah, this being Blind Tuesdays, I'm gonna be spinning the wheel again, and I'm not at home obviously, so I can't tell you what it's gonna be. But whatever that next week's Blind Tuesdays is gonna be, the category will be right here. So that's gonna be for next week's Blind Tuesdays, whatever the hell that is. So yeah. So thank you guys for tuning in. You guys let me know your thoughts on The Shining if you guys have seen it. If you guys have read the book also, let me know the key differences between the book and the film. Are they tonally similar or are they just complete polar opposites? Your thoughts on the follow-up that they did, Doctor Sleep, which I actually enjoyed Doctor Sleep. Let me know all your thoughts, everything about The Shining in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video.